The state's budget now well over a week overdue. Lawmakers saying policy in the budget plan continues to slow down negotiations. We'll hear from the budget director on how soon we could have a state budget.
Hello and welcome to Empire State Weekly. I'm John Gray.
And I'm Jamie DeLine. The week-long delay in passing the state budget means state lawmakers aren't getting paid.
Now, their paychecks are withheld until the state budget is finalized. Assembly Speaker Carl Heastie is looking to change that.
The speaker says the reason for the budget delay has nothing to do with the budget and everything to do with the policy issues the governor is trying to push through. He says it's not fair that those policy issues are keeping them from getting paid.
It's never late because of the numbers, never late. I tell you this, we could wrap up a financial budget, if it was ever proposed that way, days before we even get to the March 31st deadline.
There currently isn't a similar bill in the Senate, but it is being considered. New York lawmakers make a salary of $142,000 a year, and they get paid bi-weekly. Joining us now to give additional insight on the budget process is the state budget director, Blake Washington. Blake, I can't believe we were able to get you in for today because usually it'd be this time you'd be hammering away at this thing. How's it going right now with the budget?
Well, thanks very much for having me back again. It's always a pleasure to be here. And right now, you know, we're working. I just left before coming here today, working with our legislative colleagues on continuing to move the ball forward, making sure that that dialogue continues. So that doesn't stop. The budget deliberations go on. We have very active governor for sure, very active legislative leaders who are in constant communication, and you know, the day goes on and we keep at it.
So I know the governor has proposed a $252 billion state budget. Do you think that's going to be more than that with everything that the legislature wants, or do you think that it'll stick to close to that number?
So the governor put out our budget in January, and it's one we're really proud about. It tries to put money back in people's pockets. It also focuses on quality of life and promoting public safety. And it spends $252 billion, as you said. There's something in it for everyone. It fully funds Medicaid. It fully funds our schools. And the legislature has put together their own series of budget proposals. They have they've identified a lot of needs, a lot of priorities of their own. We'll work in as many of those as we can, but acknowledging the fact that we do have to fit into a box, the state financial plan, and you know, our revenues have to match our expenditures. So at the end of the day, you know, the value will be somewhere closer to perhaps what the governor has put forward, but incorporating what the legislature, what their ideas are as well, and their priorities, incorporating those to the best possible.
It sounds like we're hearing that it's more policy issues that are holding us up here in the 11th hour, things like discovery laws, getting agreement on that. Excuse me, why are those issues in the budget in the first place? Why wouldn't they just vote on those things separately? And is that a smart idea to have these things packaged and to have nothing to do with spending money really, but is that a problem that they get attached and then that becomes an issue holding up the whole thing?
Well, you know, I would say the governor, her focus in this budget is public safety, and discovery is an item that is sort of the long pole in the tent, at least in that sphere. Discovery does indeed include funding in the state budget. There's $40 million for district attorneys. There's $40 million for defense attorneys. So there's a nexus, and it's important that it gets addressed in this context. We know that, as I said, a lot of other needs have been addressed in the budget. You know, we in the legislature are focused on these policy items. As it relates to Medicaid and school aid, while we have to tinker around the edges on some of the governor's proposals, we'll do that. But that hasn't necessarily, that's not necessarily the fight right now, and for good reason. It's because the investments are there. So we're spending some time on some of the policy issues, which are very, very important to New Yorkers. We'll get them right. We're collaborating in good faith with the legislature, and they're doing the same, and we'll get it done.
Is the state preparing for any possible federal funding cuts at all in this state budget?
So we're reviewing a lot of the volatility that we see now. Certainly, you know, beginning just a handful of months ago, seeing some of the information that's in the public domain as it relates to cuts coming from Congress, some of the new policy priorities of the White House, starting to get our minds oriented around that. Those actions will come to be known in the state of New York probably, in several months from now. The Congress just adopted a framework yesterday. So that weighs heavily sort of in our in the overall framework, trying to think about what comes next. Those items, we don't know what they're going to be. So I think we in the executive branch and the legislative branch are certainly monitoring those closely. But certainly, if you look at the most recent news, tariff instability and just overall market instability, that's not really wonderful for people that work on budgets, particularly in the state of New York, where our budget is dependent upon the markets. And where families, when they go out, their purchasing power being diminished by tariffs is something that weighs heavily on our mind, and that flows through things like sales tax and their ability to buy homes, and those things figure prominently. Dealing with the legislature, those are some of the concepts we're going to inject into this. We've already injected into this discussion to promote a bit of fiscal discipline, making sure that we're able to live within our means, because we know there are going to be challenges ahead.
To that point, is a budget money that's already in the bank, or is it money that you're projecting you should be getting throughout the year to pay for these things? And to that point of tariffs, you're in an impossible situation, because if you don't know where those are going to land, and suddenly, as you said, if we have a trade war with China and everything goes up at Walmart and people aren't shopping as much, sales tax hurts, and suddenly that affects the money you might be counting on in October.
Right. So it's a bit of both. It's money that you have on hand now, but it's also money that you expect to receive in the upcoming fiscal year. I'm really fortunate to have some of the best economists and revenue wonks, I say that with affection, in the Division of Budget that project for this. They see what are the trends, how do they relate to nationwide trends, how are we benchmarking ourselves to bigger financial houses, the state of New York, when we see changes in GDP and we see changes in some of the macroeconomic variables, all those flow through the state of New York. We use those data to project how we're going to spend in the upcoming year. Then you have these exogenous variables of a tariff or the unknowns, right? I've been working in the Capitol building for 20 years. We went through the Great Recession. We went through, most recently, the COVID pandemic, where we saw receipts bottom out. Those are things that are very, very difficult to plan for. On the upside, we under the governor's leadership, put forward a budget that spends what we have, stays within our means, and we live to fight another day. So being mindful, being watchful over these trends as we go forward. Also engaging with the legislature, bringing their ideas to bear when the time is right. We may have to modify into the future, but I know they stand at the ready to do that.
And my final question for you, when do you think we could see a finalized state budget?
Well, today, as we say, today is March 42nd in our word.
Yeah.
So a couple of days late, but listen, this budget will get done when all three parties have something to be proud of in its adoption. As I said at the outset, working with the legislative leaders is the New Yorkers should be proud that we have such engaged partners in the legislature. New Yorkers should be extra proud that they have a governor that cares about these priorities and cares about making New York State more affordable and protecting our families and communities throughout the state. So taking the leadership from all of them, I know we'll get something that New Yorkers are proud of.
All right, we'll have to wait and see. Thank you so much.
Thanks for coming
Thank
in.
you.
Corrections officers seeing a lifeline after being fired for striking. When we return, we'll hear from a lawmaker with some prisons in his district on the steps he would like to see taken to get correction officers back to work. Welcome back to Empire State Weekly. We are continuing to follow New York's corrections officer situation. Governor Hochul signing an executive order extending the state's disaster emergency for correction facilities.
The move also partially lifts the blacklisting of correction officers who participated in that statewide strike.
The order allows previously fired striking COs to be rehired for work for counties, cities, and towns or other municipalities. But the blacklist remains in effect at the state level.
This comes as correctional facilities continue to see issues with understaffing. The previous strike had been to protest mandatory overtime at state prisons, as well as the implementation of the HALT Act. Joining us now to give additional insight on the current state of corrections in New York State is Senator Dan Stack. He's a Republican representing the 45th District. Senator, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me today.
So talk about this new bill that you are sponsoring that would bring back some correction officers.
Sure. I mean, just a week or two ago, the governor's budget director went on the record and he was reported in the media saying that the National Guard cost for the aftermath of the strike was costing the taxpayers $100 million a month. That number seems a little high to me, but that is the governor's number. Now, quick math, the 2,000 corrections officers that were fired, if you brought them back at the average salary and benefits, that's going to equate to about $20 million a month, if you could get them all to come back, and I don't think that's possible. So I would rather have a staffed up and knowledgeable and qualified workforce working in there rather than thousands of unqualified, untrained National Guard members. On top of the safety aspect, you also would save an awful lot of money, according to the governor. So, what this bill that we would put in, it's not necessary. The governor could change her mind tomorrow and hire these guys back. There's nothing in the law. There's nothing in the Taylor law that says that she had to fire them or blackball them. And right now, her solution to these short staffing problems is apparently to rely on 5,000 or 6,000 National Guard members instead of 2,000 correction officers, and to release inmates early. I mean, that's the other thing too. Because they don't have the staff to watch them, their solution to this problem is to release people, convicted felons that were sentenced by a judge early, to cut the number down. So I would rather fix this with corrections officers and bring them on. And on top of it, apparently it's a cost savings. But the governor hasn't done that. So I put in legislation. Again, not necessary. She could do it without legislation. But I want to give all my colleagues on the other side of the aisle the opportunity to go on record and do the right thing legislatively and put the governor in a position to either sign or veto the bill. I'm not going to hold my breath. The Democrats in the legislature seem to like and embrace the idea of coddling criminals. They've been doing it for years. So I don't think they're going to be in a hurry to do this. But you know what? There's a bill out there, and that's an option that's available to the legislature if they have the courage to do the right thing and hire these guys back.
Have you heard from correction officers themselves? Do they want to come back?
Sure. Well, as you might know, my senatorial district has more prisons than any other district. I have 7, and I visit all of them regularly. And certainly in the last couple of months, with all that's been going on in corrections, I made a point to go to visit the correctional facilities. And I've talked to a lot of people that were on strike that didn't go on strike. And I've, of course, talked to a lot of people that have been fired after the strike because they didn't go back by the governor's deadline. And I can tell you that it's a mixed bag. There are some that will say, I won't go back until there are bona fide safety changes. And that's what the strike was about. I think people need to be reminded that. I think the governor and my Democratic colleagues would be happy if the public had the misconception that this was about greed and money and these guys wanting more, another $1 an hour or more vacation time. That is not what this was about. That was what this was about. I don't think they'd have the support of the public and my Republican colleagues that they do. It's always been about their safety concerns. So, some of those that have been terminated, I think won't come back until there's changes. And I'm still fighting to make those changes happen. But, I think a good number of them would. And if you could get 1,000 to come back to work, if the governor would rehire even 1,000 of them, I mean, that's a couple of years worth of academy classes. If the training for a new corrections officer, if you can recruit them today. I don't think that the last couple of months has exactly been a recruiting poster for corrections in New York. I think anyone that would think about going into corrections, if they've been reading the paper, unless they've been under a rock for the last couple of years or a couple of months, they'd be saying, oh my God, who wants to work there? But if you could recruit them, the training classes, the academy runs 8 weeks, and they've historically in recent years had about 50 people per class. They used to have a lot bigger classes than that years ago. But I mean, it would take years. It'll take a couple of years to train 1,000 new COs. When you have 2,000 that you fired, Governor, and you could bring them back. And again, all she has to do is set aside her pride, and her ego a little bit. And I think this has become very personal for her. And that's not a good place for somebody that's in a leadership position to be. You need to make good decisions for the right reasons, not out of spite, not out of anger. So some of them would come back, but some of them, unfortunately, are going to hold out, understandably, until they feel safer.
And what do you say to other lawmakers who say, they broke the law by striking and they left their other coworkers, in those correctional facilities, working and kind of left them hanging?
Well, first, again, over safety concerns. And the numbers are there. DOCS's own data shows that inmate on inmate and inmate on staff assaults spiked over the recent changes that the lawmakers in Albany have made. So I would tell those lawmakers that say they did this themselves. Well, they did this because of what you did to their work environment. I would say that we've got to have a safe environment, and we need trained corrections officers to bring in there. And this was over safety. There's enough hammers in the Taylor law. They were all penalized double time. Every day that they were out on strike, they lost 2 days worth of pay. So that happened no matter what. But in addition to that, the governor threatened repeatedly to terminate them, took their health insurance, fired them, and then turned around and blackballed them so that they couldn't work for any other state or local government in New York. That was all well beyond the Taylor law. So I think that they've been hammered enough. And now we've got to just look ourselves in the eye and say, well, what are we going to do? We're going to have safe prisons? Or is the solution to the staffing problem to keep 5,000 National Guard people in there at 5 times the cost of corrections officers who aren't trained to do the job? Or are we going to do the other thing that the governor started to do, is release people early into the public, into our communities? I don't think that's an acceptable risk, and I don't think that's a smart solution to this problem. You got to be realist, and you got to say, all right, look, these guys went on strike for a safety concern. We should address that safety concern, and we should welcome them back with open arms, because to be driven to that point where you would strike illegally says a lot to me. It gets my attention. What is going on here? And I've been in and out of these for years, the facility, so I know what they're talking about. And they are unsafe places. I've met the guys that have been sucker punched by an inmate and broken an eye socket. Or I've met people that have, in a scuffle with inmates, have injured themselves and need repeated surgeries and may never work in a corrections facility again. We have an obligation to our employees to provide a safe work environment. And if this was a private industry, the state's Department of Labor would be all over them with subpoenas and lawsuits. But because it's corrections officers, Democrats and all, we don't seem to care. It's part of the job. Suck it up and deal with it. I mean, that is just not an acceptable attitude to have. But unfortunately, that's what I'm seeing from the other side of the aisle and from the second floor.
All right, we'll have to see what happens with your bill. Senator, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me on. Have a good weekend.
You too. The Trump administration taking back millions of dollars from New York City to cover the migrant crisis. The move causing a significant issue in the city's budget. We'll explain how the city plans to pay.
Welcome back. Trump administration is now taking back nearly $200 million that was promised to the city of New York to help cover the costs of the migrant crisis.
The mayor and the city have filed a lawsuit, but Mayor Adams is downplaying the urgency and the impact of losing this money. Pix
11's Henry Rossoff bringing us the impact this could have on the city.
We are going to fight and state that this $200 million belongs to us.
But Mayor Eric Adams says while he will use his city's legal team to try and recover the $188 million that's supposed to reimburse the cost of the migrant crisis, he was hesitant to directly criticize President Trump for taking the money away. He aimed his fire instead at President Biden, who did little to help New York City as a flood of hundreds of thousands of migrants cost nearly $7 billion to feed, house, and help over about 2 years. Mayor Adams says he's looking to have a more productive working relationship with the Trump administration, specifically hoping for help with infrastructure and public safety.
I got to deliver for our city. And that's what I need to do. And all those who are saying, oh, just fight and resist. I'm not part of the resist movement. I'm part of the produce movement.
Meanwhile, City Council Finance Chair Justin Brannan says this is a deeply concerning moment as New York begins to figure out its $112 billion annual budget, 10% of which usually is funded by federal grants.
What's concerning for us is that it permeates the entire budget, right? From the Department of Education to the Department of Environmental Protection, there is federal money all over the place, and we rely on that money as part of our budget. So we can't afford to have any of it clawed back.
Brannan says at least this time, Mayor Adams did not have to be publicly pressured into actually fighting for money that belongs to the city.
The first time we woke up and Elon Musk tried to take $80 million from us, it took City Hall a week for them to even file a lawsuit. So that ain't going to work. They need to share our urgency here.
Stick around. We'll be back with a look at the week ahead in just a bit.
If you have a comment or story idea, let us know. You can email us at news@news10.com. You can also reach out on X at WTEN.
Finally, on Empire State Weekly, we want to remind you of an important deadline for travelers this week. We are 1 month away from the deadline for what they call Real IDs. After May 7th, the Real ID or enhanced license will be required before boarding a plane or entering certain government buildings.
Anyone applying for their Real ID will have to pay a renewal fee and come prepared with several forms of identification. DMV reservations are strongly encouraged as long lines of people have been rushing to get their paperwork squared away.
Next week, we'll be speaking with the DMV on their frequently asked questions. For now, from all of us here at Empire State Weekly, I'm John Gray.
And I'm Jamie Deline. We'll see you here next week.
And don't forget, you can watch this show, Empire State Weekly, all over New York State. Here's the full schedule of the show on 10 TV stations across the great state of New York.